What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So getting into Green Lantern Recharge, really it's Green Lantern Corps Recharge, but much like Green Lantern Volume 1, this is really just kind of a refresher on what the Green Lantern Corps are about. But while Jeff Johns did write this issue, he actually won't consistently write the Green Lantern Corps. Instead, his main emphasis will be on Green Lantern. But the cool thing between the relationship with these characters is that it's almost the opposite from what we're seeing in DC Rebirth right now. For example, if you're reading DC Rebirth, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps deals with the Green Lantern Corps out in space. Green Lanterns deals with Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz on Earth. This is the opposite simply because of the fact that when the Green Lantern landscape was relaunched by Jeff Johns, that what he did is he focused on Hal Jordan under the Green Lantern banner on Earth, and the Green Lantern Corps dealt with space. So it's actually kind of a cool concept. But those of you guys who picked up Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps #1 and felt baffled by what was going on with regards to all the stuff that was taking place and all those characters, a lot of that is going to be fleshed out here in the Green Lantern Corps line of stories. Now, these will intersect when we get into like Revenge of the Green Lanterns, when we get into like Sinestro Corps War, a lot of the crossover events. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps will simply come together for the duration of that story, and it'll be that way for quite some time. There are stories like Mystery of the Star Sapphire, things like that will focus largely on Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris. But the fact remains here that Jeff Johns does a really good job of intertwining these two stories together for the purpose of giving us a full fleshed out idea of what the Green Lantern mythos is about. Now, the way this kicks off is simply with the death of a new Green Lantern. I mean, I guess this is appropriate. The last time we had the Green Lantern landscape, Hal Jordan killed them all when he declared himself to be Parallax. But with regards to this, what we find out is there are some stars around the cosmos that are basically going supernova, and those stars exploding are resulting in the formation of a black hole, which are either sucking Green Lanterns in and killing them, or transporting them to different locations, or else simply exploding and killing Green Lanterns in the explosion before they actually turn into black holes. But what Johns does is he sets the stage for splitting up Hal Jordan and the rest of the Green Lanterns. And the reason why I say that is because of the fact that Hal Jordan, while in the middle of a test pilot mission, is approached by Guy Gardner. And Guy Gardner basically says, look, all the Green Lanterns, except for you, are being recalled back to Oa. And the reason why is because of the fact that there still have to be Lanterns that are protecting their own sector. And one of the ways that Jeff Johns really gets away with this is by simply saying that with regards to the planet Earth, there's like 4 Green Lanterns. There's Hal Jordan, there's John Stewart, there's Guy Gardner, and there's Kyle Rayner. And so they have 3 more Green Lanterns than they actually need. Not to mention that Hal Jordan is the greatest of all the Green Lanterns, and so the Guardians of the Universe can kind of get away with letting him stay on Earth and recalling most of the people there. But the reason why Kyle Rayner's leaving, the reason why John Stewart's leaving, and the reason why Guy Gardner's leaving is because of the fact that the Guardians are consolidating a bulk of the Green Lantern Corps back to Oa for the purpose of recreating the Green Lantern Corps itself. Now, at this point, we switch over to a person by the name of Saronic Natu. Now, Saronic is, as you guys know right now, in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, she basically took over the leadership role of the Sinestro Corps following the death of Sinestro, and she's one of the individuals alongside John Stewart who was instrumental in combining the corps together. But when the comics made reference to the idea that Saronic was a Green Lantern at one point in time, this is what they're referencing. What happens is she's basically in the middle of surgery. She's actually on the planet Karuger, and she's immediately provided with a Green Lantern ring. Of course, the reason being because of the fact that there's a whole host of new lanterns that are being offered positions. Now, what we'll find out is the reason behind this being the Guardians basically took away the notion of there being 1 Green Lantern per sector, and they're actually going to have 2 Green Lanterns per sector. But what ended up happening here is that because of Karuger's history with Sinestro basically becoming corrupt with power, imposing his own will and his own dictatorship, really in this sector, more than any other, Green Lanterns are looked down upon. They're frowned upon, and people who become or really kind of inducted into the Lantern Corps are basically individuals who are kind of ostracized from society until such a time that they come back without the Lantern ring. Now, one of the other things that Jeff Johns establishes here is that just because a person is inducted into the Green Lantern Corps does not mean that they're required to stay there. Instead, they can vacate, they can walk away from being a Green Lantern at any point in time. Now, of course, again, we'll actually see that play out with Saronic here in a second, but what we do is we basically just jump to a handful of different sectors, and these aren't wildly important. It's just different individuals who are basically becoming Green Lanterns. But the reason why Jeff Johns included this little tidbit here in the story is because what it shows us is that so long as as a person has the ability to overcome great fear, they can become a Green Lantern. And so individuals who were engaged in, bloody civil wars and different things like that, if they have the power to overcome great fear, they will become a Green Lantern. So it's not like the hammer of Thor, right? It's not like you have to have certain attributes, like, 5 or 6 different attributes that allow you to wield the hammer. The Green Lantern rings are far more simplistic than that. And the reason why is because of the fact that when the Guardians formed the Green Lantern Corps, they knew it had to be a mishmash of individuals who would hold loyalty to the Green Lanterns. They wouldn't turn against the Green Lanterns, but also they knew some of these individuals needed to know how to fight. They needed to have a history of warfare. They needed to have a history of engaging in different conflicts. And so what we end up doing is we basically follow Kyle Rayner and Guy Gardner back to the planet Oa. Now for them, this isn't new. I mean, they've been here before on a multitude of occasions, but for them, it's also, kind of interesting to see the Green Lantern Corps being reformed and its ranks being expanded. And so of course, there's all measure of different creatures here in order to, who are going to be inducted into the ranks. And some of these critters look outright just weird, man. Like they just, some of these critters look crazy. There's some wild folk. One of them looks like a giant slug. It's crazy to see how some of these folks look, but the fact remains here, with these ranks being expanded, what's basically being done here is really, it picks up with the idea of different people who are going to be playing out different roles, but a lot of them come from their own backgrounds. And so some of the funny things here is that some of these individuals hail from like warring planets, so 2 members of different societies who've been waging war against one another. And that's what creates an interesting dynamic in the realm of the Green Lantern mythos, is because of the fact that there are some people who are part of races and their races have a blood feud, and they've been fighting for millions of years, but they have to put those blood feuds aside for the purpose of working cohesively as Green Lanterns. And that's why I say this works so well, is because the rule of the Green Lantern Corps is it doesn't matter where you hail from, your loyalty is to the Corps first, and then to the rest of the universe second. And so if you're in the middle of engaging in a conflict on your own planet and you're recalled back to Oa by the Guardians of the Universe, you drop what you're doing and you go back to Oa. That's the expectation that's given to you. Now, we're also reintroduced to the character of Salak. And Salak's kind of like this administrator, so to speak, for the Green Lantern Corps, which is to say, he kind of speaks on behalf of the Guardians directly to the other Lanterns. Of course, the Guardians themselves are very, very isolated from the rest of the Green Lantern Corps. But one of the funny things is that Jeff Johns immediately establishes that there are some individuals out there who do not see this as a good thing. They do not see the Guardians of the Universe being isolated as something intrinsic. Instead, they see it as something that can be nefarious. No one really knows what the Guardians are planning back there. And so in truth, it really all just comes down to whether or not you believe the Guardians are inherently good guys. And because of the history of the Green Lantern Corps, there are a lot of those out there who do not. They look at Hal Jordan when he declared himself Parallax and tried to destroy all existence. They look at Sinestro when he became a bad guy. They look at the history of the Lantern Corps and say, these are individuals who are inherently corrupted. These are individuals who are inherently bad, and the Lantern Corps does not do us any favors. Now, of course, Jeff Johns will basically adjust these stories in a way to where it'll expand a lot of the mythos on the Lantern Corps, but that's how a lot of people look at them within the DC universe. Now, the other half of this, and the reason why the Guardians are in such a state of seclusion, is because of the fact that they've been analyzing all these different stars that are being converted into black holes. And the biggest question to them is why? What in the world is going on here that Green Lanterns are missing, that Green Lanterns are vanishing, so on and so forth. Now, something else to point out here is that this instance of individuals who can basically walk away from being Green Lanterns comes in the form of Saronic. Remember, because of the fact that Sinestro made Karuger a dictatorship-like planet, basically ruled over it with an iron fist, Saronic is one of several individuals who absolutely abhors Lanterns. And so despite the fact that she's been chosen, she basically says, I am not going to choose the path of the Green Lantern, I'm going to leave. And so she basically just bails out. And so of course she tells her ring, take me back, at which point the presumption is that when she got back home, she would basically release her ring and say, go choose somebody else, go find somebody else who's capable. Now, the reason why Saronic holds this idea isn't necessarily just because of the fact that Karuger had become such a dark place, but because of the fact of her own ties to Sinestro as Sinestro's daughter. And so because of that, her biggest fear is that she will basically fall down the path of becoming a bad guy. She'll fall down the path of becoming Sinestro. And that really is the biggest fear of almost anybody on Karuger itself. Now, from here, things are pretty straightforward in the fact that we basically have the new members of the Lanterns learning how their powers work, the various training sequences that go on. We're gonna need a montage, the little training sessions and so on and so forth, but also the idea that a lot of these individuals may see themselves as people who are kind of above the law, but they exist to maintain order within their sector and to ensure the safety of those who reside within. And so it's basically the Green Lantern Corps saying, you do not exist above the law. Your loyalty is to the Lantern Corps. After the Lantern Corps, your loyalty is to the betterment of everybody in your sector, not just one particular planet, which is really the fate that befell Sinestro when Sinestro became a bad guy, because he simply came to the belief or came to realize that his own planet was bereft of order and structure. And so he chose to impose that, paying more attention to his sector or to his planet than he did the rest of his sector. Now, again, with these various individuals just kind of hanging out, monitoring these stars, making sure that nobody comes across them, different things like that, playing just as much of a humanitarian role as a police role, some of these individuals end up seeing these stars explode and lose their lives in the process. Now, of course, the reason why is because the explosion of these stars kind of takes them by surprise, but even these stars going supernova happens in a matter of seconds. It doesn't happen over the course of days or hours or anything along those lines. And so one of these instances of a couple of the lanterns getting carried away with their powers come in the form of two individuals who basically witness a Thanagar ship coming past. Now, with regards to this ship passing by them, what ended up happening is they basically boarded it. They got carried away and said, we're the police here. We're the ones who run the show. You have to answer to us. Let us board your ship. Of course, this happens after they tell the ship to turn away, and the ship says no, that they're on a mission of mercy, that kind of thing. So again, it's kind of a cool scenario, but ultimately they're sucked into this black hole. And the question is, well, where do they go next? Well, they're effectively being held in stasis. And what's actually happening here is that within these black holes are basically the spider race, like blood enemies of the Guardians of the Universe. And so what this does is it sets the stage for the next half of the story with like Kilowog, basically the drill instructor for the Green Lantern, answering a call for aid, arriving to where these lanterns at after he was pulled into the black hole. And it's basically this realization that there are organisms, there's an entire race of people that exist inside these black holes. Not only that, these aren't simply just holes. Instead, what they are basically, subspace networks. When these stars are turned into black holes, they're literally just kind of removing the star out of the way, and they're opening up a hole in space and time that allows them to move all throughout the universe at, I guess really super speed isn't a phrase that I would want to use, but it's the best way I know how to describe it. But basically it's kind of like creating shortcuts. It's really what black holes are, shortcuts in space. But the fact remains here that with these various lanterns facing off against these various threats, again, it's only a handful of them. It's really not the entire core. But again, this is also met with the arrival of a handful of bounty hunters. So again, Jeff Johns is kind of throwing a lot of things at us, but this is really done for the purpose to show us what all goes on in space. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is because of the fact that the Green Lantern Corps does not just face off against one villain and they defeat that villain and they face off against the next and then they face off against the next. It's not a linear thing. The Green Lantern Corps will face off against a multitude of villains all at the same time, or one immediately right after the other, and sometimes they'll even overlap. Towards the tail end of one conflict, another will crop up. And what this does is it shows us as the reader that as Green Lanterns, they have to be able to multitask. They have to be able to rely on their teammates. They have to be able to recognize there are some folks out there who just want to destroy stuff, and there are some folks out there who just want to kill Green Lanterns. Because keep in mind, with regards to the mythos out there, it's not basic. It's not a simple thing. There's a lot of really deep roots here. Jeff Johns invokes the notion that there's collateral damage. There are people out there who have been killed in fights between the Green Lanterns and other people, or they've lost loved ones in fights between the Green Lanterns and other individuals. And because of that, there are people out there who want vengeance against the Green Lantern Corps. There are some individuals out there who just have bounties on members of the Green Lanterns. And so there are all kinds of different facets with regards to those individuals who swear, violence against the Lantern Corps, who want to see the Lantern Corps destroyed, who want to see them brought to an end. But again, ultimately what this does is it basically has, Kilowog, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, a handful of others, Saranic, all fighting their way out of this, whole spider race and eventually making their way free. The problem with this is that as time progresses, the more they fight, the more they use their lantern rings. This wouldn't necessarily be a horrible issue, but they're not able to draw their own batteries to them. And so because of that, they can't charge their rings. And so they're basically fighting with a lifeline. Now, by the time they make it out, they do so, in order to basically draw their lanterns out and to keep themselves alive. But of course, what this does is it still begs the question, what is the spider race doing and what's their intention with destroying the Guardians of the Universe, and how are the lanterns going to respond? Well, the lanterns respond in the exact way that we would expect, because remember, because of the fact that their loyalty has to be held directly to the protection of the universe, the Guardians of the Universe, and Oa itself before all else, what this does is it basically has Hal Jordan and it has John Stewart arriving on the scene. Now, this is cool the way that Jeff Johns does this, and the way that it's drawn out is awesome, because it is basically Jeff Johns saying, hey, look, we have all these new guys out there, and sure, you have Guy Gardner, and sure, you have Kyle Rayner, who's still, Ion at this particular point in time, but there's those guys, and then there is Hal Jordan, and there's John Stewart, a cut above the rest. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people will get mad if you say that. They're like, no, Kyle Rayner's better than John Stewart, or Guy Gardner's better than John Stewart, or they'll say some of those guys are better than Hal Jordan. But that's the beauty of this story, is because one, it gives us the core in and of themselves, but two, it also asks us as the reader, which Green Lantern is the best one, which is the question that I'm asking you. Which Green Lantern do you think is the best? But in my mind, I think Hal Jordan is probably the best of all the Green Lanterns. His character and the fact that he's kind of zany and carefree, and the fact that he's really rough around the edges, but has it where it counts. That's one of the things that I love about his character so much. But ultimately what this does is it leads to the fact that this spider race is basically going to invade the Guardians of the Universe home planet and essentially destroy them all, suck the entire thing into a black hole as kind of this last-ditch effort to eliminate the Guardians in their entirety. Now, the Spider Guild itself is not wildly important here. What is actually important is a group called the Saiyans of Vega, and that was one of the things that I kind of wanted to wait until this point to really bring up. With regards to John's entire landscape, one of the things that he establishes here is, again, the idea of collateral damage. With regards to this network, with regards to these little black holes and so on and so forth, what it did is when they rescued Saronic, it required Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, a handful of others to enter the Vega system. But what we found out was that over the course of their existence, that the Guardians of the Universe and the Vegans or Vegan people, whatever you want to call them, that they had basically created a pact. You stay away, I stay away, and the neutrality will be maintained. With the Green Lanterns crossing in, this violates that neutrality. And so what it does is it sets the stage for possible retribution. Now, that's one of the reasons why this is so significant, is because Geoff Johns makes this just as much about border skirmishes as he does about the Green Lanterns patrolling their sectors and keeping the universe protected. And that's why it's so cool, is because, again, it's not just this linear thing. It's not just, and now we fight this guy for 5 issues and then the story's done. There's a lot of complicated plot devices. There's a lot of character development and a lot of complex stuff that goes on here, which is why it's so cool. The great thing about what Geoff Johns does is he paces it out in a way that is easy to understand. And of course, even then, once Geoff Johns leaves and the title's taken over by Dave Gibbons, is taken over by Peter Tomasi, is taken over by these various guys, that pacing out of the Green Lantern mythos will still be maintained, and it'll still be easily digestible stuff, which is one of the reasons why people love this run so much, is because it's not overly complicated. And that's why I still say, that for the most part, when it comes to the Green Lantern mythos, it's all about having to read it in its entirety. It's not really something you can kind of pick and choose, because it creates a more cohesive story if you do, because then you find yourself caring about characters that you wouldn't have really cared about before. Now from here, things wrap up pretty fast. And again, that's what's kind of funny, is because of the fact that we would expect with the Vegans coming after, with the Green Lanterns basically invading Vegan space, and it would lead to this, oh my God, this whole second huge major event. But instead, that doesn't happen. What they end up doing is basically using the power of their rings in conjunction with the central power battery to essentially take the energy of this sun that's going supernova and send it right back through this black hole network that's been created by the Spider Guild and destroy the home base of the Spider Guild. But that's why this is interesting, is because, again, Johns doesn't say, okay, hey, here's like this self-contained story and that's it. It's not just a series of closed stories that are all basically one-shots. What we end up getting is just this ongoing theme that we'll have this little notion introduced that, well, maybe the Vegans will come back for their revenge, and then at some point along the line, they do. And so you kind of have to harken back to Green Lantern Corps Volume 1 with this story, Recharge, in order to understand why that's happening. Now, at the same time, it's also kind of self-contained and to some degree, in the sense that, you can really just sort of read Brightest Day by itself and be fine. But again, it just kind of creates more of a cohesive story. So that really kind of wraps things up pretty fast in terms of, the Green Lantern Corps. It's not really about giving us this major event. Instead, it's about setting the stage for the characters. So while the Spider Guild is essentially obliterated, while their home base is more or less destroyed, what this does is it basically ends with this reformation of the Green Lantern Corps. It ends with the Guardians of the Universe saying, it's time that we stop being recluses, and it's time that we basically step out into the universe and people come to fear us. And it's also basically saying, hey, look, here is where you're going to find everybody else besides Hal Jordan. So again, it's kind of cool here, but with regards to the Guardians themselves, this is also intriguing, because it's basically John saying, hey, look, the Guardians serve to protect the universe, but they can be pretty nefarious, and they're dubious, and sometimes they're full of lies, and the fact that they don't reveal everything to the Green Lanterns will come back to haunt them. So again, it's really him kind of setting the stage, at least the very early days, for stories like Wrath of the First Lantern and things like that, revealing these little bits and pieces of information over the course of his entire Green Lantern Lantern run, essentially saying the Guardians are not the benign individuals that you thought they were. They're pretty dark. They're not really trustworthy. But again, this also basically ends with Saranic effectively taking up her role as a Green Lantern. So for those of you guys who are reading Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps right now, again, you know, you're probably kind of interested about Saranic. You may be kind of a position like, who is this girl? What's the deal with her? This will cover the story, the progression of her character leading up to Robert Venditti's current work with the idea of Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns and her essentially taking over the Sinestro Corps at the behest of Sinestro, leading up to the moment right now in the realm of DC Rebirth. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I love Jeff Johns' Green Lantern. It's crazy. And anyway, guys, I will catch you all later. Peace.